the power of the Crimson Bands of...
Everyone is familiar with Juggernaut, the incredibly powerful antagonist in the Marvel Universe, but few are aware of the mystical being that powers him. Cyttorak is an all-powerful dark deity who has the ability to transform the heroes and villains into unstoppable forces, and some of the strongest characters in the Marvel Universe have been powered by this dark god. Although Juggernaut is mainly regarded as the chief agent on Earth who is the flag-bearer of Cyttorak, there are many others who have been taken over by this entity. In this video, we'll narrow it down to all the others who have been involved with Cyttorak and map their detailed journey. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is Cyttorak, and what makes him so powerful? As we've stated already, Cyttorak is simply a dark god who had earlier been banished to the Crimson Cosmos dimension. This extra-dimensional being was once worshipped as a god by primitive humans on Earth, but he was later sent back to his home dimension. He built a temple in Asia as he was competing with his contemporaries, and later, when a group of monks tried to summon Cyttorak, they ended up summoning a destructive aspect of him. He was somehow sealed in a magical gem, but his impact was far from over. In order to further his destructive avatar, he simply had to select someone as his host, and their powers would be greatly enhanced. They would then become an unstoppable entity, which made Cyttorak live up to his title of Destroyer and Lord of Oblivion. Now that you have a fair idea of Cyttorak and his destructive influence, let's quickly take you through all of his hosts except for Cain Marko, aka Juggernaut, which is really a story for another video. Jin Moonho. Cain Marko, aka Juggernaut, is largely regarded as the primary carrier of the powers of Cyttorak, but it might be quite intriguing for you to know that someone wielded these powers before him. This was none other than Jin Moonho, who was a simple farmer and grew up in South Korea. He endured a life of poverty and hunger, and when he came across the hidden temple of Cyttorak, he was battered and bruised following encounters with bandits and his malnourished life. He came across the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak inside this temple, and this effectively turned him into a Juggernaut-like being as he was bestowed with the powers of Cyttorak. Now, the dark god Cyttorak is known to have a negative and corruptive impact on the psyche of those he takes over, and Jin Moonho suffered the same consequences. When he was under the control of Cyttorak, he was ordered to align himself with the imperialist forces of Japan who were occupying Korea during the time. He gave up his Korean name and adopted the name Taiko, which was a nickname given to him by the Japanese soldiers. Taiko meant the drum, and he was an unstoppable force who helped in the devastation caused by the Japanese. However, Jin Moonho still had some humanity left in him, even though he was corrupted by Cyttorak. He refused the commands of Cyttorak when he was ordered to destroy his own village. As you can imagine, the mighty Cyttorak did not take too kindly to this refusal, and he sought out another avatar, which happened to be Cain Marko, the one whom we've grown to identify as Juggernaut. In a fight that followed, Cain Marko ended up killing Jin Moonho, and the new vessel for Cyttorak was cemented. As for Jin Moonho, he did not really have an extended run, but his powers were no less than that of Juggernaut. In fact, he was just as powerful as him and possessed all the unique abilities that we generally associate with Juggernaut, such as the superhuman strength, leaping, stamina, and invulnerability. It's also worth remembering him as the first earthly being who was taken over by Cyttorak, even though the effect was short-lived. Colossus. Pyotr Rasputin, aka Colossus, was a mutant born with the ability to transform his body into steel. This granted him incredible strength as Colossus, and later he was approached by Professor Xavier with the chance to change the world for the mutants as a part of the X-Men. He became a dutiful X-Man and indulged in multiple adventures in his efforts to create a better society for mutants and humans. He even temporarily embraced the philosophies of the mutant extremist Magneto, and became one of his acolytes following a family tragedy that greatly affected him. However, for the purpose of this video, we're more concerned about the time when he was manipulated into becoming the new vessel for Cyttorak. It all happened when the X-Men failed to stop an attack on San Francisco by Kurth. In this desperate situation, Cyclops ordered Magic to travel to the Crimson Cosmos and meet Cyttorak, and Colossus and Kitty Pryde insisted on going along. Meanwhile, Ileana convinced Cyttorak that Cain Marko was secretly serving another god, and Cyttorak was furious about the betrayal. He wanted to take his power back from Cain Marko, and Magic willingly offered to become the new avatar of Cyttorak. In order to spare her the burden, Colossus intercepted the deal and volunteered to be the new avatar instead. Cyttorak was more than happy to turn Colossus into his vessel, and he went on to receive the powers of the Juggernaut. He made good use of the insane powers and turned against Kurth, who was winning the battle in San Francisco till then. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to kill the Sinister Serpent, and Kurth teleported him away in his Cyttorak avatar. Also, now that Colossus was majorly under the influence of Cyttorak, the corruption was inevitable. He struggled to fight the constant desire to inflict destruction and cause violence. And this was quite different from his usual gentle nature. This also took a toll on his personal relationships. Even though Kitty Pryde tried to convince him to go with her to Westchester, he remained on Utopia because he didn't see himself fit to be around the trainee children. This effectively ended his relationship, and he then went on to join the extinction team formed by Cyclops. Although it's not spoken about enough, Colossus was perhaps one of the best avatars of Cyttorak, and some of the abilities that he displayed, like the vanishing spikes and claws, proved his natural affinity to the raw power. However, he wasn't too convinced about maintaining his composure, and he volunteered to be imprisoned alongside his sister for safekeeping. Later, we even saw him taking on the Red Hulk at the bottom of the sea when the Avengers came to kidnap Hope Summers. He portrayed certain special aspects of Cyttorak in this conflict, and he easily overpowered the Red Hulk. However, once he regained control, he allowed the Red Hulk to defeat him so that he wouldn't lose control of himself once again. Eventually, Colossus teleported out with Colossus and the other mutants. Another interesting instance featuring Colossus as Cyttorak's powerhouse was when he came in contact with the Phoenix Force. This happened when Iron Man planned to create a weapon that would destroy the Phoenix, but the plan failed. It ended up fracturing the Phoenix, and it was forced to turn the 5 X-Men, Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Colossus, and Magic, into its avatars. They even handled the corruptive influence of the Phoenix Force quite well because of the power being dispersed among them. During this time, Colossus tried to talk Cyttorak out of retaining him as a vessel because he was also serving as the avatar of the Phoenix Force. Earlier, Cyttorak had been angered because Cain Marko betrayed his trust, and Colossus assumed that it would be the same with him. However, Cyttorak revealed that Colossus was his favorite avatar in over thousands of years. This was because Colossus engaged in various destructive battles even as a hero, and Cyttorak wanted him to continue being his avatar. He also maintained that the Phoenix Force and Cyttorak were not incompatible as forces of rebirth and destruction. Colossus still tried to use his abilities to force Cyttorak into releasing him, but the Dark Lord was simply too powerful and returned Colossus back to Earth. Things took a turn once again after Namor lost his portion of the Phoenix, and it was gained by the remaining 4, including Colossus. During another conflict with the X-Men, it was revealed that Magic had conspired all along so that Colossus would take up the offer of being the next avatar of Cyttorak. Also, during the fight between Magic and Colossus, they both lost their bits of the Phoenix powers, which went to Cyclops and Emma. Learning about the Great Conspiracy made Colossus realize that she was insane, and he momentarily lost control over himself and attacked her as she teleported him away. Finally, he made his way to the ruins of his farm in Siberia, which had been created using the Phoenix powers. After some time, it was Magic who actually helped Colossus free himself from the influence of Cyttorak. She did so by transporting him to Limbo, and it turned out that her soul sword was powerful enough to sever the influence of Cyttorak in this domain. Even though this actually helped his cause, Colossus was still broken about his sister's betrayal, and promised to kill her if they ever met again. He settled down in a cave and was later found by Magneto when he was looking around for the members of his extinction team. He quickly found out that Colossus's spirit was broken, and he informed about the same to Storm and left his fate in her hands. His interesting reign as the avatar of Cyttorak marked some very interesting moments in Marvel history. During this time, Colossus derived his powers from magic and not his mutant abilities. Since Cyttorak was pleased with his performance, he lent him incredible powers that even Cain Marko couldn't access. His demonic form changed his appearance completely at times, and spikes, scales, and claws sprung out in action as he lost control over himself in this state. He also possessed superhuman strength, speed, and invulnerability, which are basic powers granted to anyone blessed by the powers of Cyttorak. Living Monolith. Before he turned into what we know as Living Monolith, he was simply a man named Ahmet Abdul, who was a professor of ancient Egyptology. He came up with the theory that the ancient pharaohs and gods of Egypt were actually mutants, and when he announced such controversial findings, he was accused of heresy. A mob attacked him on the streets, and even his wife and infant daughter were caught in the fury frenzy. Abdul panicked as he tried to get away, but ended up wrecking his car, which caused the death of his wife. The tragedy changed him significantly, and he soon discovered his ability to manipulate cosmic energy. Meanwhile, a cult that believed his theory saw him as a living god reborn, and the patron of Abdul who reached out to him was none other than the immortal mutant Apocalypse. Of course, Apocalypse wanted to make use of Abdul for his own selfish purposes, and this put them at odds at one point. Many years later, as Abdul was wandering through the Sahara Desert, he heard the call of Cyttorak, as did many others around the world. He headed to Thailand in order to take over the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak, and by the time he reached the temple, he found out that Storm was already there. Abdul, or the Living Monolith, defeated Storm, who tried her best to keep the Cyttorak's chosen few away from the gem. At the same time, the former hosts of the incredible powers of Cyttorak, Colossus, and Cain Marco were fighting in the main chamber of the temple over the gem. Abdul grabbed the opportunity to claim the ruby, and he became the new avatar of the powerful Dark God. Initially, after being overwhelmed by such uncontrollable powers, Abdul was ecstatic and wanted to bring about a great deal of chaos into the world. Unfortunately for him, the X-Men were simply not paying him enough attention. Finally, when he was attacked by the X-Men, little did Abdul know that the whole thing was a part of a bigger plan. The idea was to buy Colossus enough time, and things took an unexpected turn when Abdul lost his Cyttorak powers midway through the fight. He became the Living Monolith once again, and he was seemingly destroyed by the most popular Cyttorak avatar, Juggernaut. His stint as a host for Cyttorak was rather brief, but in this short time period, Abdul did gain some insane superpowers. For starters, Cyttorak granted his godly body to his avatar, and the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak actually bonded to the avatar's soul and made him a godly being. The physical strength of the Living Monolith during this time was at par with Juggernaut at his best, and so were his stamina and speed. He possessed all the other notable superpowers of Juggernaut, like invulnerability, healing abilities, and immortality of sorts. As luck would have it, he lost it all when the Cyttorak avatar was taken away from him, and he became an easy target for his enemies. Justin Jin. Justin Jin, aka Junsung Jin, was linked to the first man who ever became the host of Cyttorak, and it almost seemed like life came full circle. Justin Jin was born to a broken man named Jungwoo Jin, whose father was the first Cyttorak host and had his life ruined as a consequence. Justin Jin's mother was a former waitress, and overall, he grew up through a tough childhood. Finally, his family moved to Vancouver, and they ran a small bakery named Vancity Buns over there. Justin was only 5 years old when his parents got divorced, and his father went back to his roots in South Korea. Justin went on to grow up to be a bulky teenager who was clearly bigger and stronger for his age, and he also became a skilled basketball player. Justin's life changed completely following the death of his father, and he was only 17 years old at the time. He received some of his dead father's belongings, and a small jewelry box was among them, which contained a fragment of the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak. He became the bearer of the incredible strength of Juggernaut, and Cyttorak's new host was finally out in the open. His mother witnessed the entire transformation process, and she also revealed the family secret and told Justin all about his grandfather, who was killed by Cain Marco for the mantle of Juggernaut. Justin's father never tried to secure the position of Cyttorak's host out of shame and depression, and it was now up to Justin to avenge the family name. Justin and his mother were attacked by one of Cyttorak's followers named Malphegor, who wanted to acquire the power of Cyttorak for himself. In fact, he was the one who killed Justin's father for the artifact, only to find out that it had been sent to Justin. They fought in the streets of Vancouver, and finally, Doctor Strange intervened to rescue Justin. He teleported with Justin to one of the temples of Cyttorak, and Strange tapped into the mystical energies of the temple to protect Justin. Under the guidance of Doctor Strange, Justin took over his family legacy and summoned his very own Juggernaut armor. By now, Malphegor also tracked them down, and Justin defeated him quite easily. However, when Doctor Strange urged him to kill Malphegor, he refused and realized that the real Doctor Strange would never demand such a thing. As it turned out, it was actually Cyttorak himself in disguise, and he decided that both Malfegor and Justin were unworthy of being his next host. The morals and ethics of Justin were strong enough, and he did not give in to the temptations of Cyttorak, and even though the Dark Lord mocked him and ridiculed him, Justin was happy with only a fragment of his power. He gave up on the bigger plans that Cyttorak had for him without any regrets. His mother advised him to train hard for a potential future encounter with Cyttorak, and his late father's letter to him instructed him to be a better and stronger version of himself. This is when Justin took up the mantle of Kid Juggernaut, and he tried his hand at being a superhero in Vancouver. He was soon approached by Alpha Flight, but their intense approach did not impress Kid Juggernaut. Eventually, Professor Xavier learned about the emergence of a new superhero named Kid Juggernaut, and he sent the X-Men to investigate. Later, he drafted him into his newly reformed Avengers Academy on behalf of Captain Marvel, and luckily for Justin, his life didn't go the same tragic way as his grandfather's. Although Justin was briefly a bearer of Juggernaut's powers, he did not have all of it at any point. He got his powers from a shard of the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak, and he was awarded with superpowers like self-sustenance, where he needed no food, water, or oxygen to nourish himself. He could also summon his special armor when he wanted, and he had the unusual super strength and stamina that we associate with Juggernaut, even though his strength was far lesser than the actual Juggernaut. His biggest asset was probably his stable mind, which did not get manipulated by the lust for power, and he willingly gave up the opportunity to be far more powerful because he wanted to live by the morals that raised him. Emma Frost, Sins of Sinister Timeline. We all know about the powerful mutant Emma Frost and her exploits and adventures with the X-Men. However, it's a little-known secret that she was also under the influence of Cyttorak briefly. This happened during the Sins of Sinister Timeline, and she turned out to be the perfect follow-up for Juggernaut's immeasurable powers. She wields the powers of the Dark God as her own, but do remember that this is the corrupted version of Emma Frost in the far future of Sins of Sinister. Alongside Emma Frost, Hope Summers, Exodus, and Professor Xavier were all corrupted by Mr. Sinister, and after the mutant leaders of Krakoa were brutally killed, they were resurrected with a dose of Sinister's personality. Almost any opposition that Sinister could experience was replaced by his loyal agents, and he even went to the extent of manipulating the Juggernaut to serve his purpose. The next millennium saw these corrupted mutant leaders warring among themselves, and they each had their own sectors of space. As for Emma Frost, she was the ruler of the Red Diamond and acted as the living gem of Cyttorak. Her diamond-like appearance was quite remarkable, and it was almost ruby red and powered by Cyttorak. Her remarkable transformation and adaptation of the Cyttorak's powers mark a major twist in Marvel Comics in the recent past. And like always, the Force is a great tool of chaos and apocalyptic situations in the distant future, as seen in this timeline. Emma Frost is an extremely powerful mutant, even without any external assistance. And the idea of a corrupted Emma Frost is scary in itself. Now imagine being aided by the powers of Cyttorak after becoming the new host of this Dark Lord, and the chaos is simply multiplied many times. Her court had some of the veterans of the previous Quiet Council, such as Namor and Beast, and she had a large number of mutant students being groomed to fight under her command. We wouldn't want to spoil the entire thing, but if you want to know what exactly happens to Emma Frost after becoming the living gem of Cyttorak, do check out the Immoral X-Men comic series based on these dark times. The Unnamed Child. After the success and destruction of Cain Marko as Juggernaut, Cyttorak had granted the supreme abilities to an unnamed child who even attracted the attention of the X-Men. He spent his time in torturing animals and was a troubled soul. But this child was not given enough of a story arc. Later, we've seen in the She-Hulk series that one of the pieces of Cyttorak's gems was actually used to create a creature named Behemoth that looked somewhat like an elephant. Marvelous verdict. Cyttorak could redefine the Marvel Universe in many ways. We're all aware of the important role that someone like Juggernaut has played across multiple storylines in the Marvel Universe, and all of it is courtesy of this dark entity Cyttorak. The nature of Cyttorak is such that it immediately becomes a great potential for future story arcs, and we're not really exaggerating when we talk about the extent of this potential. For starters, we can go on to have new hosts who will bear the incredible powers of Cyttorak, and it's always fun to have some exceptionally superpowered individuals in the world of superheroes and supervillains. Also, the MCU has not really delved into Cyttorak, although we have seen glimpses of Juggernaut, and there's plenty of scope in that direction as well. We would be disappointed if such a promising opportunity goes to waste, and they simply end up making Cyttorak into a thing of the past. The thing that fans love the most about this dark force is the unpredictability associated with Cyttorak, and we hope that it never changes. Do let us know in the comments below what you think of Cyttorak and his incredible powers. Also, share your views on what promising aspects of his character you deem to be so important, and which one of his hosts is your favorite. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.